I was wondering, Maharaj, Renkoji Temple, the ashes which are there, what is the basis of thinking that they belong to Netaji?
No basis at all. First of all, that there is a lot of doubt about the ashes, naturally. First, I will tell you one interesting thing about Colonel Habibur Rahman. Colonel Habibur Rahman, as you know, was one of the co-passengers of that so-called fatal plane crash. He was the one who was witness to Netaji's death. He saw that the plane was burning and Netaji was burning, and Netaji jumped out of the plane and he also jumped out and he tried to help Netaji and all that, all these stories. So, and he had, when he came to India, he was arrested and he was interrogated. And then he came back to India in 1946 and he had a long 2.5-hour conversation with Sharad Bose. And Sharad Bose was very angry. Sharad Bose told the press that Habibur Rahman is lying. He's lying to us. But there is another interesting side to this I would like to add. I like to exactly quote, yes, Mahatma Gandhi called him, Mahatma Gandhi called Habibur Rahman and talked with him for about 1 hour. And Gandhi had this habit of giving cryptic answers. So when he came out of the meeting with Habibur, and there were people asked him, what is his response to the conversation? He said, Habibur told me what his leader has ordered him to say. This is very important. Habibur told me what his leader had ordered him to say. So as I had previously told you, that this whole plane crash story is a wonderful camouflage, a smoke bomb created by Netaji himself. And the Japanese officials, Japanese administrators, the Japanese military were very devoted to him. Some of them, I was astonished when I was first reading some of the responses of these witnesses who had been interviewed by Shahnawaz, Didi Khosla and others, that whenever anybody mentioned the name of Bose, all the Japanese people will just stand up and put their hat under their head and with bowed head. They believed, it is something that they believe, that Subhas Chandra Bose is a second Buddha for Japan. So he was not only considered to be just one leader from India, he was also considered to be, as I said before, the liberator of Japan, the liberator of whole of Asia. In fact, if you notice, after the Second World War, almost 100 countries in Asia and Africa had become free from the colonial powers. So, as you can understand, there is no chain of documents related to the ashes. What happened to the ashes? Where was the body cremated? Whose body was cremated? How did it travel to the Formosa airport? How did it go? Who took it from the airport to the plane? From the plane in Formosa to the plane in Tokyo? From the airport in Tokyo to the temple in Tokyo? Who was doing all this messengering, all this carrying of ashes? And who received them? And on what authority did he receive this urn, these ashes? What is the document that said that these are the ashes of Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose? Nothing. Just some verbal kind of a declaration, not also confirmation. It's a declaration. Number one. Number two, another very important thing, that if you ask any forensic laboratory in the world, be it in Germany, be it in the United States, be it in Britain, be it in India, they will tell you that it is impossible to conduct genetic testing with the ashes of any life form, be it animal, be it a tree, or be it a human being. To find genetic material from the ashes is impossible. But year 2000, there was a big change. Listen to this very carefully. There was a big change. Before 2000, even Anita Puff, the so-called daughter of Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose, had said that genetic testing is useless. My mother does not believe, or even I do not believe, that anything will come out of genetic testing. It is completely unscientific. That is what Anita had said at that time. Because she was speaking the truth. But year 2000, very important, Justice Mukherjee Commission was constantly summoning all the people who had any knowledge about Netaji. So they were summoning people like Sugata Bose, people like Krishna Bose to the commission. But Sugata Bose and Krishna Bose were coming up with some excuse or the other, that they were unavailable, they were busy, they were ill. They did not attend a single summon or a single session with the Mukherjee Commission. What were they doing? They were visiting Japan at that time, year 2000. They were visiting Renkoji Temple. And the urn, the ashes, there were really some ashes in the urn. And those ashes, you know, I'll also tell you the name. The Mukherjee Commission had given out the name Okara Ichiro. Okara Ichiro was a Japanese soldier. His body was burned because he died in combat in 1945 in August, around the 18th, and his body was burned. It was the ashes of that man. But from 2000, after the visit of these two family members of Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose, the ashes were not there anymore. It was replaced by skull bones and 7 teeth half burnt, intact, 7 teeth half burnt, and pelvic bones. So important, so interesting. These can be genetically tested. You see? And most probably, these skull bone and the pelvics and the teeth belonged to some member of the Bose family who had died and who had not been burnt totally, so as to use them in the Renkoji temple. So that if a genetic test is ever made, it will be traced to the same family. So people can say, oh, this was Netaji. You see? And that is after 2000, Anita Puff started saying that she believes that the Renkoji ashes testing has to be done. Even the Japanese, and another very important thing, that the Indian government has been paying money ever since 1947 till date to the Renkoji temple for maintenance, just because it is assumed there is a popular perception is being created, is being built to give the impression that Netaji's remains are there. So the temple is being run by Indian money. Imagine the audacity of the whole situation, the absurdity of the whole situation. And so far, no Indian government official or Prime Minister or anybody had the guts or the courage to go and bring the ashes back to India, because they know that it is an explosive question. And if you ask me personally, the ashes, in the beginning they were ashes, they belong to Okara Ichira, but now it is not ashes anymore. These are remains, these are bones of some dead member of the Bose family, so as to make a genetic trace to the Bose family. So that, you know, that is the whole game that is going on now.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Sir, I have one childish question to you, sir. Sir, there were Congress, there were BJP, there were NDA, there were different political parties. Even, but among many parties, why the files will never be exhibited and displayed before public? Why? I mean, there are different interest groups. I mean, what Congress thought, maybe the BJP may be thinking differently. I mean, the other parties may be thinking differently. But parties after parties, I mean, the political parties, they want to hush up this thing particularly. I mean, what is your idea behind that?
Actually, as I have told in the very beginning of this lecture, this is not only a lie about Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose. We have been lied to for more than 100 years about everything in our country. Everything. About our history, about our culture, about our dharma, about our life, about our victories, about our defeats, about the rules of the foreigners, about the British period, about the post-British period, about everything we have been lied to in such a way so that we can feel inferior to others. It is very important to understand this. Instead of giving you a straight answer, Professor Mukhopadhyay, I would like to draw your attention to a little bit of conversation that happened. This has also come out from the files that have been declassified. I have already mentioned to you the name of Clement-Attlee, who was the Prime Minister of Britain in 1947, 15th August at that time. Many years later, he came to India. He was a past Prime Minister. He was not holding any official portfolio. So he was a guest in Kolkata in Raj Bhavan, Governor's house. And that time the Bengal governor the acting governor was the Chief Justice of Kolkata High Court, FanibhushanChakraborty. Now FanibhushanChakraborty got into a conversation with him. He said, why did it seem that the British were in a haste, were in a rush to run away from this country? Is it because that after the Second World War, Britain was completely devastated? That they could not hold on to India anymore? Or is it because of the non-cooperation movement of Indian National Congress? Or the threat of Gandhi's, revolution or whatever? Non-cooperation movements, the memory of the Quit India movement. What is the role of Gandhi in the fact that you and the white Britishers had to fly away from this country? And his answer was a cryptic, one word, minimal. Clement. He said minimal. So, Fanibhushan asked, so what made you run away? It seemed as if you were in an absurd rush to get away from this place. And his one word answer was Bose. Then he explained that why was he saying Bose? Firstly, because after the INA was defeated, there was a tremendous kind of a repercussions in the armed forces of the British Indian Army, especially the Royal British Navy. And the naval mutiny started from Mumbai, then it was called Bombay, and it spread to Visakhapatnam and all the other places. There was a huge mutiny. People were chanting the name of Netaji. People were using the Azad Hind Fauj slogans and crying Jai Hind and killing British officers, asking for freedom. You see? So, important, Dr. Mukhopadhyay, is to understand that the British ruled over India with the help of Indians. Now these Indians were no longer to be trusted. They could not take for granted the obedience and the commitment of the Indian soldiers as they used to do before. Also remember, Dr. Mukhopadhyay, that the two great wars where the British took part, they won these wars not because of their own soldiers, but because of the soldiers of the countries that they had colonized. Mostly soldiers from India. If Indian soldiers had not participated in the Second World War and had not fought the British, then Germany would have definitely won the war. And today, instead of English, we would have been talking in German. I can assure you that much. You see? So, this is very important to understand.
Wonderful explanation, sir. Wonderful. Many thanks. It's a very much revealing.
So these truths need to be hidden, you see. That is why no party. For example, Dr. Mukhopadhyay, try to imagine today if Netaji, an old 125-year-old Netaji with a stick in his hand, who comes back to India, which political party will actually welcome him? No one. It will be only his followers and his lovers and his devotees who will welcome him. Neither the Congress, nor the BJP, nor the CPM, not even the forward bloc would welcome him at all. You see? Because each have their own interest to protect.
I think he talks about the war criminal tag for Subhas. I have only one thing to know. Netaji Subhas didn't join the Germans. He sought help from the then Hitler's Germany. Then he didn't join the Japanese either. He took advantage of the Japanese running over the Southeast Asia for directly intervening with his fellow countrymen, who were prisoners of war of the British, of the Germans earlier, and to the Japanese. Got organized, I think, initially by Raspberry Post. So I think the war criminal tag comes when if the atrocities are committed, the way the Germans committed, the Japanese committed in China, in Manchuria, and other parts of Southeast Asia. So Indian National Army did not commit; it is acting as a liberating force. Prove that, and there's no instance of that they committed undue torture on British Army. There's no such evidence as per my little knowledge. So could that be ever an explanation for that? Because he was a war criminal, he would have been exposed to the international law, and that's why he was a famous leader of the subcontinent. So I think that is a different issue.
As
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Shantanu Babu, yes, as per your first observation about his status as a war criminal, yes, I agree with you. So let them come out and say that he was not a war criminal. That is my point. That was the point of all the researchers at that time too. Okay, let United Nations declare that he is not a war criminal. They have not done so. Let the Indian government declare also. For time and again this has been raised in the parliament, that declare that he was not a war criminal. But the Indian government has said, we don't know. Every time this issue has come up, the government has said, we don't know. I'll give you an example. In 1961, Atul Sen, his doctor advised him to take a break, that he should go to the western part of India, and a change of air would be good for your health. Now, he was a Congress leader who had worked with Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose in Bangladesh. He knew him. So while he was in Naimisharanya moving around, he heard about a Bengali sadhu. So he was curious. I mean, he just wanted to have a Bengali conversation with a monk. So as soon as the conversation started, he was not allowed to see his face. There was a curtain in between. He recognized the voice. And he stayed there for 1 month. And then it was from him, he got permission from this monk. It was from him that Atul Sen came, he got permission, and he came back to Kolkata, and he informed Dr. Pavitra Mohan Rai and Leela Rai and everybody about this mysterious monk. But before that, what he did was, he wrote a letter to Jawaharlal Nehru, because he was quite close to Nehru. And he said that, please tell me, is Subhas Chandra Bose still a war criminal? What happens if he is found in India? Because I know where he is, and I will be able to reveal to you his place and identity only when you give me an assurance in writing that he is not a war criminal. So the Prime Minister of India, I mean, what would anybody expect? That the Prime Minister of India, Jawaharlal Nehru, would be surprised by this letter? There was no hint of any surprise at all. Nehru said, in a very casual way, there is no question, he is such a big hero in India, we will welcome him. That's all. He did not ask, where is he? How did you come to meet him? Are you sure? Are you serious? Are you kidding? Subhas is alive. That kind of response was not there at all. You see? So, maybe he was not a war criminal, but where is the official document saying that he was? He was not. That is very important. I mean, this is very important. I'll give you another example, Mr. Shantanu.
Yes,
There was a time, probably you're aware, maybe in the late 60s, when there was a big hue and cry about the fact that this Sadhu in Sholmari, in Kuch Bihar, he is Netaji. So all big, people were thronging the place, the Sholmari ashram. Many friends of Netaji, many of his former Azadin Fauj colleagues visited. And strangely, even some of the revolutionaries who were very close to Subhas Chandra Bose, some of the Congress leaders, they also visited that place. But very strange, some people came out and said that yes, definitely he is Netaji. And some others came out and said, no, he is not Netaji at all. He is a nice person, a good Bengali sadhu, but he is not Netaji. This contradiction was so upsetting for the Bengal Chief Minister at that time that he said, and this is very revealing, he said, there appears to be more than one monk in Sholmari ashram. You see, at that time Nehru got a bit nervous. He sent one of his parliamentary colleagues who was very close to Subhas Chandra Bose and said, go and stay there in the ashram for a few days and let me know whether Subhas is there or not. So this man went. And at that time, Neheru&MurajiDesai was then a friend of Nehru. He was sent to England and he was told to wait for a telegram if required. As soon as he received the telegram, if need be, he has to, that is Neheru&MurajiDesai would have to report immediately to the headquarters of MI6. All these are available in books, Now I'm not exaggerating at all.
yes.
So this friend who went and stayed with this monk, Bengali monk in Sholmari, after a few days, he informed Jawaharlal Nehru, no, this man is not Netaji. Nehru informed Neheru&MurajiDesai, no need to go to MI6, come back. So if it was Netaji, then MI6 would have taken over that ashram, Sholmari ashram, and Netaji would have been captured. On what basis? How can this happen in a free country? That an intelligence agency for a foreign land comes and arrests a sadhu in Sholmari? How can this happen? If there is not some kind of a treaty between India and England about this, at least on Netaji, maybe he was not a war criminal, but there were certainly a kind of an understanding between Britain and India about Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose.
I have a question, Maharaj. As you mentioned that Netaji was onto the spiritual path from a very young age, and he initially was part of Gandhiji's non-cooperation movement. But why did he suddenly take to this militaristic approach to independence? Usually, when we see that someone is spiritually awakened, we do not think of taking up arms. But why did he suddenly become very critical of Gandhiji's non-violence movement, and why did he pursue this militaristic approach to independence?
Madam Aluguho, let me clarify that he did indeed join Gandhiji's non-cooperation movement, but his interest in military activities against the British was not at all sudden. It was something that was developing within him from a very early age. When he joined the Congress, because of Gandhiji's politics and because of the fact that Gandhiji was getting a lot of importance in the Congress, he was with Gandhiji, with the non-cooperation movement, but at the same time, he was deeply in connection with some of the revolutionaries in Bengal and elsewhere. And he was motivating them. In fact, he was creating group after group of these young revolutionaries. And he was advising them to follow Brahmacharya and do sadhana and to read the Gita and to read Vivekananda and to prepare for war. And number two, this is another kind of idea that we have been taught, that a spiritual person does not take up arms. In the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna is asking Arjuna to fight. and not to talk like a pacifist, because he is a fighter, but he is asking Arjun to fight in a spiritual way. In a spiritual way, that is, fight without a violence in your heart. Is it possible? Yes, that is yoga. That I am fighting for dharma, I am fighting for the truth, I am fighting for what is right, I am fighting for my country, but I am not fighting because I hate the other person. I am not fighting because I dislike him. That is, that violence or hingsa is actually not in action, it is in the mind. So Subhas Bosu was deeply influenced by the true dharmic traditions. The idea that India is a place of non-violence is a story that has been thrust upon us to make us weak, to break our backbones. The whole world worships Gandhiji, but nobody follows the principle of Gandhiji because everybody knows that it is not practical at all. And what is this non-violence? Just a few minutes ago I had explained that the Indian armed forces, the Indian Jawans, thousands of them, millions of them had to fight for the British in the two world wars. Why? Because Gandhiji forced them to. Gandhiji did not tell our armed forces, did not tell our Jawans, do non-cooperation with the Germans, start fasting in the Second World War against the Germans. He did that for his Congress activities. You see? So, his idea of non-violence is full of hypocrisy. You know, when he was in South Africa, when Gandhiji was in South Africa, he applied to be a part of the army against the Dutch, which is called the Boer War. When the British were fighting against the Dutch settlers, he wanted to be a part of that war. And because of his height and because of his body structure, he was disqualified. He was allowed to drive the ambulance, to drive injured students from the war field to the hospital. You see, that Gandhi, a barrister Gandhi, who used to wear ties and coats and trousers and considered himself to be a fellow colonialist in Africa, suddenly came to India and became a saint, wearing a cloth around his waist. So the idea of Gandhi was actually the idea of the British. The word sant is similar or the same etymological roots with saint, santa, santa in Latin, saint in English, sant in Sanskrit, shanto in Bengali. You see, they created this image because they knew, the Britishers knew, Indians love the image of sant with no clothes, poor man. Indians love this image, you see. But the fact that the kind of ahimsa that we think that Gandhi had preached, we think that is the Indian ethos. It has got nothing to do with India, nothing to do. It is typically Gandhi's, which has actually made us weak. Look at our gods and goddesses. Each one has a weapon. Why? To fight against what? To fight against evil, to fight against wrong, to fight against what is not just, what is inequality, to fight against discrimination. Our gods are fighting. Ram is fighting a just war. Sri Krishna is fighting a just war. And Subhas Chandra Bose was deeply aware the need to build up an army, because British were fighting us with weapons, and we did not have weapons. So we needed to create our own weapons. We needed to create our own army, because that is the only way we could drive them out. And it is proved, as I had explained in the lecture, that our non-cooperation and Gandhiji's policies did not win us independence. It is actually because of Bose that we got our independence. At least the partial independence that we have today is because of Bose and his INA, and because the Indian armed forces under the British were revolting. So the Bose was the main factor, Gandhiji was not. So this truth needs to be hidden. That is why all this hush-hush, that is why they are trying to cover everything under the carpet. You see?
Thank you, sir.
Namaskar.